Hi, everyone, and welcome to the ADHD Kids Can Thrive podcast. I'm your host, Kate Brownfield. I'm a certified whole person and ADHD parent coach. I'm author of How We Roll, a parent's journey on raising a child with ADHD, and a parent who's been right where you are. It is truly my pleasure and my service to bring you a greater understanding of ADHD and all the many aspects to consider. Every child with ADHD is unique, and so are their individual strengths and struggles. If you're looking for tools, insights, and real stories to help you and your child thrive, you're in the right place. You can always find me over at ADHDkidscanthrive.com, and while you're there, you can click to download the first 3 chapters of my book for free. And if you're ready for more personal support, you can always schedule a free consultation with me directly on my website. All right, let's jump into today's conversation. Welcome to the ADHD Kids Can Thrive podcast. Today, my guest is Dr. Chansky. She is founder of the Children's and Adult Center for OCD and Anxiety in Philadelphia. She has helped thousands of children overcome fears and gripping mental compulsions. She is the author of 3 books: Freeing Your Child from Negative Thinking, Freeing Your Child from Obsessive-Compulsive Disorder, and Freeing Yourself from Anxiety. And today, I think we're going to focus on your book about Obsessive-Compulsive Disorder because you have a new edition of that book coming out.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm not sure when this will be aired, but August 5th, 2025, totally revised and updated edition of Freeing Your Child from OCD.
Okay. And why did you do the update? Like what can parents find in it to help them?
Okay. So this was the first book that I wrote 25 years ago, and it's really, I would say my heart has always been with the family. I mean, with all the families that we see, of course, but when I first started to work with families faced with OCD, there was really nothing that was out there to show them landmarks that there was a way forward, that their kids could, get better, have their lives back, their family could have their life back. And so even though folks were saying, write about anxiety, there are more people, I did that later. I just really felt drawn to sharing what I was learning with the families that I was seeing 25 plus years ago. And then when the anniversary came around, I saw this, coming up in this year. Well, actually, it's a little bit of a funny story because I thought not much has changed in 25 years. Silly me, right? And so I thought this will be a very manageable project here for the ADHD podcast, right? Of just managing expectations and, organizing your time. And I thought it was going to be pretty defined to just, I think we'll talk later about strep triggered or, PANDAS, PANS, the kind of medical piece, some updates with medication, things like that. But what I didn't realize was actually how much I had learned and how much I had changed in 25 years. Really, the best teachers we have are the families that we work with. And over the course of these years, I've just refined so much the language of what reaches families, how to facilitate conversations between parents and kids. And so that's why I ended up, and I'm so fortunate that my editor was
Oh my gosh. Yeah.
to go through, and my family willing to put up with me, doing this. There was just so much refinement that I really wanted to share, and I feel fortunate to have had the opportunity to put that in writing, because when you're lost, which is what families experience when their child is going through any difficulty, but a mental health challenge, which is completely foreign to what, it's not just kind of more worry than we would expect. They're not just really worried about grades or, will their friends like them? Those are challenging enough situations for parents, but it's these things that just really don't make sense and are frightening to parents. And the more frightened that we feel as parents, we can't really
Yeah.
function.
Yeah.
And so, being able to lay out the kind of landscape for parents and share the language that's going to help reach their child. We have the first instinct to make things better, to, help people not feel pain. That's a really good instinct. And in this realm, we have to show, feel our empathy and connect with our kids, but understand we also have to go these places that are strange and be willing to, understand that it's not our child that's weird. They already feel that way.
Yeah.
But the more educated that we are, we can say, that is like OCD normal, we'll say, because kids will be really frightened of why why would they think that they were going to, hurt their little brother or something like that? They don't want to do that. And so when parents are really, kind of up to date with what's the what is sort of the pattern to overlay over these strange things, their anxiety comes down. They can say, this is OCD normal. We can go in and I can help my child label that, help separate my child from what OCD is saying. And then together we can look at that and decide what we need to do.
Yeah.
So it's a real kind of, reorganization, if you will, of what the conversation looks like, because prior to that, it might be, I have to keep washing my hands. No, you don't, they're fine. Sort of that understandable dynamic or whatever, but that's not going to help anybody change a pattern, really.
Pattern.
You have to
Okay. Yeah. So,
point to what the pattern is, and that's going to really change the flow from there.
yeah. So once you recognize, so the reason I wanted to have you on this podcast is because I think ADHD is just, we all think we understand what ADHD is. It's like this well known term out there. And I think families tend to think, oh, it's the ADHD. And if I fix the ADHD, that may fix anxiety and OCD. And that's kind of not always the case, right? It's about detecting what is really going on with your child.
Yeah.
And that's where you do the work, right? So if you have this combo of ADHD and OCD, and maybe the OCD is where the work needs to happen for the child and within the family to make progress, right?
Absolutely. But I would say certainly with something like ADHD, which is not necessarily focused on certain situations, maybe some situations more than others, but it's more, how a child is walking through the world, that it is going to be helpful to do that work, to create that trust, to show that you're on your child's side, you understand why the brain is busy, that it's a no fault thing, how they can focus, having that foundation first. Then you have that trust to go to the next level, which is about, why your child is washing their hands or, lining up their shoes or whatever it may be.
Okay. And how does emotional regulation play into OCD?
Yeah, I mean, every way. That's such a that's such a great question. We could just pause there and say, how does
Abs-
emotional regulation play into this conversation? What we do after this? Everything in the world, right? I always say to kids, I'm like, I think if we all learn to regulate our nervous systems, like it would be a peaceful world,
It
wouldn't it?
would be, yes.
So yes, absolutely. That, you know, it's understandable that, say, just for the parent, if they come upon their child up at 1 a.m, I don't know, tucking in their sheets just right because, it feels like they can't go to sleep if everything's not right, but when they get into bed, whatever it may be. Of course, we're going to have that up regulation, if you will. We're going to have a lot of, reactivity to that, feeling like, uh-oh, something's wrong. I have to, again, what's the first instinct? I need to stop that. You know, that's not right. And so if we can work on down regulating our nervous systems and it helps. This is why I write books. It helps to understand what's going on. If we understand it, we're willing to down regulate.
Yeah.
If we don't understand it, it wouldn't make sense not to kind of keep escalating to say like, well, what is it? What is it? So by understanding, okay, right, they're caught in a loop. It's not that they're not in danger, but they are caught in a loop. My goal is to connect with my child, not correct them, connect, and then point to the problem. The patterns are really, they're keeping you up, or OCD's, really, really rough tonight. We got to work together because you need to go to sleep. So when we can know that part of our job that's going to determine how effective we are in everything else we do is to kind of pause, take a second, down regulate, then we're just going to bring our calm to our kids, which is really what they need.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So let's talk about the difference between, like, give us a highlight with your expertise of just what anxiety is and maybe like how that looks a little bit different than what OCD is. Do they often go hand in hand?
They do, and ADHD also can overlap, as you know. Tics, it's just kind of a lot of traffic in the brain, but what
Mm.
department is it in? So with anxiety, it's going to be more about worrying ahead about something, feeling like something might be wrong, feeling like you need to plan for something, sort of, assuming the worst of a situation and that there's nothing that you can do about it. These are not choices that we make to have those, kind of thought paths start. That's something that is a wiring issue. Fortunately, when we recognize that that's what's happening, we can start to question that, name what's happening. My worry brain is saying, I'm going to fail the test, or people are going to laugh at me or something. Okay, what do I think about that? Again, making that separation between what worry is saying and what you think. And then, you start to change that pattern, that it might not be that, either you'll nip it in the bud sooner, not listening to worry and the next worry and the next worry, or you just really change the pattern, that that's not how you're thinking about the world. There might still be situations that warrant pausing and, being concerned about it, but it's sort of not the default frame of how you're going to walk through the world. So with anxiety and worry, it's more the what ifs, what could happen, feeling like something could be wrong, planning ahead, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And so with OCD, it's more of a kind of like superstition on steroids, if you will. It's, thinking things that don't make sense even to the child. Either, sort of magical, I need to do something, you know, I need to tap my book 4 times. I need to tap everything. Whoops, it started with the book, but now it's everything in my life because there are 4 people in my family, and if I don't tap 4 times, something bad's gonna happen to my family. Just and it's not that kids are wanting to think that way. This OCD is, I say, in a positive way. It's a medical, biobehavioral disorder. This is not your creation. Fortunately, we're able to make changes with things that come up, but it's not like your child is trying to think this way. A lot of times, like I said, it doesn't make sense to kids themselves. They get frustrated with themselves. That's another kind of landmark for parents to be able to say, this isn't you, that's your OCD. It is really frustrating. It feels really personal. But guess what? There are millions of people around the world having those same thoughts intrude right now. Just like, they may have a really different life, but this is just how that works. Fortunately, when you can hear it more as a brain bug, a broken record, then you can downgrade the authority of it. It's not like the principal telling you that. It's not, God telling you that. It's not us telling you
Yeah.
that. It's just, it is this, disaster man, whatever, it really helps for the child to name this themselves. And that annoying thing, that's, that thing. Sure, then that's how you're going to talk about it. It's just that thing is like a glitch in your brain, your wonderful brain. And just that one part, we're going to teach it when something is important and when it isn't.
It's not. Okay. All right. So tell us now about in the book, you're updating how PANDAS may have a play in OCD. What is PANDAS and how is it connected to maybe OCD?
Yeah. So, and I'm so bad with dates. So forgive me,
Okay,
people.
we forgive you.
Checking. I don't hold on to numbers like that. But back in the day, what year would it have been? A number of years ago, researchers at the National Institute of Mental Health were seeing kids who were coming in with OCD, but the kind of the story, the timeline and the nature of it were really different from kids who had regular OCD. Regular OCD might be, develop over years. Parents come in when the child is 8 and they say, since, I don't know, maybe 3, 4, 5, they've always had these things. And it just, it's like this year, it just got really bad. That's non-PANDAS OCD.
Okay.
PANS or PANDAS, and I can explain that in a second, is a type of OCD that is set off by an autoimmune response to an illness, strep, Lyme. Some kids, with COVID have had like spikes in their symptoms. So either it's can be an exacerbation of OCD, like your child already had it, and then suddenly, like overnight, it's so much worse. You feel like, do we need to bring them to the hospital? Like something's wrong. Just the intensity of it and the suddenness of the onset is completely different from what happens in the typical kind of waxing and waning course of OCD. So what's really been helpful over the course of this, time that I've been working with families with OCD is that there's been more attention that has been brought to pediatric autoimmune neuropsychiatric disorders associated with strep. That was PANDAS. And pediatric acute neuropsychiatric syndrome, I believe, is PANS. A later iteration, the change was to make the bigger umbrella to include not just strep as a trigger, but other illnesses, that
Wow.
could create, set off this sudden episode of, where really it's very worrying to parents. The, really important news is it's very treatable what you have to do, and it's not necessarily the cognitive behavior therapy that we do for regular OCD may have a role, but it's really going to be medical treatments.
To heal the body, the autoimmune response.
Yeah, to address whatever it is that the body is creating the antibodies to. So if it's Lyme, if it's strep, whatever it may be, and which is causing inflammation that is causing the OCD symptoms. So, first stop would be to go to your pediatrician. Hopefully, back in the day, there weren't as many people who are aware of this. Some people still are like, they don't believe in it. That's very frustrating. Find a different doctor. There are, and I can send you links to organizations that you could share with your listeners.
Oh, that's great. For a
Yeah,
resource list, if you're looking for like
yeah,
a PAN,
exactly.
PANDA, okay.
Providers. that, very savvy, and they won't say like, well, I'm not you sure it's not da 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 da. No, it's not that.
Yeah.
Yeah, so many families, sort of part of how I think there's been more awareness is in a school community. You'll have a family who has this experience, and then it's like the school nurse, the guidance, the school counselor, everybody starts to sort of get like, oh, wow, I kind of heard about this, but wow, this is a thing. Like they see the child had to be out of school for a few weeks till they were better because it just takes over their
Their
system.
lives. Okay,
There,
with the
there
pain.
are degrees of severity, but for a lot of kids, it really becomes kind of an untenable situation in the acute stage. Parents feel like, the child's asking 100 times an hour, the same question over and over. They are inconsolable. It becomes, talk about dysregulation. But
Yeah.
that is a situation that it makes sense that you would be getting those signals of, we need help. Sometimes families do take their child to an ER, but, the pediatrician would be a great
The
uh,
first stop. So
stop.
you're seeing OCD on the rise then? I'm thinking like Lyme is on the rise. COVID has exposed pretty much everybody at this point. And so these are like new diseases, if you will, or new exposures that children are getting. So have you seen like an increase in OCD-like cases?
That's a really interesting question. I don't know, what the answer is to that, but
Okay.
I'm gonna look into that now that you're bringing that up because there's more illness. Is the frequency of PANS and PANDAS increased? I don't know. But certainly with when you asked before about the difference between anxiety and OCD, that the old model of just what causes, if we have, let's say, a genetic predisposition to something, stress is something that, can be, make the conditions such that that predisposition emerges because the system or the body is stressed. So, during lockdown and everything, and even even as we continue to navigate wherever we are in this pandemic, I don't know what you want to call it now, but that there is stress, that certainly that kids experienced extreme stress, actually labeled as a trauma, like a global trauma experience because of being in an unprecedented situation. But even since then, parents will still talk about what they're, even if researchers aren't looking necessarily at like learning losses, but just social emotional losses or changes, that there hasn't been kind of a big reset after that kids are kind of we're all doing our best,
Yeah.
but the stress continues in different forms.
Yeah, and that affects everything. That affects all our mental health, right? And so, okay. So are
Yeah.
you suggesting too, if you're prone to it, prone to anxiety, prone to, I guess you're not, prone to, if you have ADHD, you may exacerbate your symptoms with stress, right?
Sure.
Everything just gets,
Because we don't, yeah, we are built, what is stress? Excuse me, where we started and talking about anxiety. Anxiety is the worry part, but our kind of physical makeup is, we were built in a time where we needed to mobilize for disaster, emergencies, threats. So what is stress? It's our fight or flight system, getting set off. And so, yeah, we don't make good decisions in that state.
yeah,
We make good decisions if there's actually a threat, right? I
right.
mean,
Like a real life threat. Yeah.
right, exactly. I'll say, if there were a tiger here, I would very much thank my you know, nervous system for getting me out of here faster than I could have ever imagined I could move. But when it's not a tiger, when it's a picture of a tiger, when it's a test the next day, having that dysregulation doesn't help us study for the test. That's where really I like to help kids and parents understand how we're built so we can interpret those signals that are coming up for us more accurately. We're not, freaking out because freaking out is the response that would be the most adaptive. It's our nervous system just, kind of jumping jumping ahead because that's what it does.
Yeah.
But then we can come in and say like, okay, I'm nervous about the test, but what's going to be, like what's sort of the plan that I need for it, doing that fact checking.
Yeah. Okay. So if your child does have OCD, there is help and treatment options
Absolutely.
available for families.
Yeah.
And can you highlight some, just like what would be the names of the treatment that parents could explore if they're worried their child has OCD, or they know they have OCD, but they haven't done any kind of treatment plan? Like what are those options?
Yeah, absolutely. So there's the treatment that I talk about in the book it is, first line treatment for children is a kind of cognitive behavior therapy that is exposure and response prevention. So basically, it seems very counterintuitive that if a child is afraid of touching the floor, you know, and won't, is hopping around the room to prevent that or something, or, not touching anything because they don't want their hands to get dirty, then the treatment would be to help them understand the signals that they're getting, help them, have agency to say why they think those signals aren't exactly right. And then step by step, actually doing what we call exposures or courage challenges to, you know, whatever they're ready for. You just need something they can say yes to. They might say no to a lot, but just the step that they are ready to stretch to challenge and change that pattern of their brain saying, like, if you touch the floor, your hands touch the table that other kids touch, someone in your family is going to die or you're going to get sick or something like that. So that is the behavior therapy called exposure and response prevention. So you would look for, and I'll send you the organizations that parents can search by their geographic area to find qualified practitioners who are really experienced with this
Right.
and will their child. So there's that. There's medication, which is not the first line for kids. A lot of kids by the time medication kicks in, which might be a couple months, if they're doing the behavior therapy, they may be at a place where they're already improving. They don't need that. But certainly if, like for teens, if they are at a place that, a lot of depression from, yeah, if they're having a lot of depression from just how OCD is taking over or from some other reason, then medication will absolutely help them to mobilize, kind of get their energy together to be able to do the therapy. So really those are the choices. But I will say parents learning how to respond differently and kind of teach their child what's going on sometimes, and there's research to support this, that can be as effective as working with a child directly, because especially with young, families with young kids, who is receiving all the questions, who is, managing all the the towels that are thrown in the laundry, over and over, it's the parents. So if they can have that language, which again is why I did write this
Right. The book.
and share just how to create cooperation and a sense of collaboration in facing what the brain is saying so that you're not the enemy, your child is not the enemy, that you really can see so much change happen. And that might be enough even to just have parents be really informed about what to do and how to respond to OCD situations.
Wow. can have a huge impact
Mm.
in the whole journey of it. And as do OCD kids, if you're working on it as a family and perhaps with outside support, does an OCD child who turns into an adult, is that like kind of arc of their development like with a typical child, or is it kind of more takes a little bit more time for them to I guess my question is when I look at is it like ADHD kids? I guess if they, where it just takes a little bit longer in their own development of their executive functioning system. Is that true for
Yeah,
OCD kids?
right. That's such a, again, I think it's so great to have this conversation together because there are ways that ADHD and OCD kind of have similar impacts and interference in, moments
Right.
of, right? But in their ways that it's really different, we don't say that we can cure OCD, but we do expect, and we see, and I always tell families, like, I wouldn't love my work so much if we couldn't make change happen for or help kids to make change for themselves, that it's more that treatment would be whatever it would be. Maybe it's, a couple of months, or even if it's, a year or something like that, that kids learn in that time how not just to how to respond to the symptoms that they're having or the triggers that they're having. And in that process, neuroplasticity, so wonderful, change the brain pattern so they don't keep getting those signals, to wash their hands or whatever. Or if they do, they know so much that they're able to kind of pivot and override those. But they learn that for a lifetime. Maybe, I have folks who I will work with for, intensely for a number of months. And then we will do check-ins a couple times a year, but maybe a few years later, that now it's a teenager, they're learning how to drive. They have new, kind of intrusive thoughts that are happening. It's not a long therapy again, usually, but they need a booster,
A
a
tune
reminder.
on, tune in, tune up.
This situation, kind of, oh, right, that's OCD again. What's it saying? Yeah, what do I do? So, with really the prognosis is good that this is something that is highly treatable, and that that kids will be able to affect a change, that this isn't how they will be walking through life. They won't, need to be they won't need to be kind of working around this all the time
Yeah.
to manage it, which I think of with ADHD, finding adaptive strategies to manage what the brain's tendencies are, to take you off course or keep you on a course that you need to, kind of switch from. That I I think, I think of that, but you can tell me if I'm have a wrong view of that's kind of a longer arc of a managing, your executive functioning.
Yeah. Okay. That's good to know. Okay. So as we wrap up, what would be kind of you said a lot. What would
I'm
be,
so sorry too.
no, it's been
I didn't take
wonderful.
enough breaths between, yeah,
You
I
know
just
what? It's great. I think, like, if you're a parent or know somebody that you think OCD is, really affecting their life and you're not sure what to do, this is fantastic. Very informative. But if we tied it up, like, what would be kind of your parting words of wisdom, which is for sure by the book, because there's so much it sounds like you can learn and figure, just learn how your role is as a parent to support your child.
yeah. I tell families that often at the end of a first session, kids feel better.
Wow.
One knows what's going. It's not like the work is done, but the work can start. The work can start to change in a new direction of not just how do we get out of the house with these symptoms being so time consuming. It's how are we going to, reframe what's happening so that step by step we're reshaping what, you know, those rituals are. So eventually the child is doing things. I call it last yearing it. How did your brain tell you to, handle those situations last year? well, I wasn't having that. Right. And things were pretty good. Let's look at, how do we last year it here? How do we get closer and closer to last yearing it? If that makes sense.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
the message is, that even just going to someone or, reading the book, you will feel, I think you will know that people have gone here before. You feel so lost, but everything you're saying has been experienced by, thousands, if not more, people. And there are really clear pathways through. Your child will respond to you once you know how to talk about it. And there's, lots of support and help to, make that journey, whatever parents need, really. More and more people, it's a different time. More and more people know how to treat OCD. So it won't be like it used to be, people didn't go to treatment because no one knew how to help them.
Yeah. And the few people who did, it was hard to access.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's a
So
very hopeful picture. Also honor the fact of how hard this is, because it is. Can feel really lonely for parents, because they kind of can't talk to just somebody in the supermarket line about the, strange and scary things that their
yeah.
child's doing. But there are, communities. We have online communities to get support. But I think, whether that's reading, my book or the other great books that are out there, just like, oh, okay, this is a thing. These are the steps to take. Thank goodness, we're not stuck here.
Yeah. Yeah. This is wonderful. Thank you for your time today.
Gosh, Kate, it was a pleasure.
Yeah.
Yes.